Now, years ago, I worked in the fashion business and kept coming across this man called Roger Saul. Very successful, very nice man, ran a company called Mulberry, and I'm delighted to say that Roger has become a gardener. And Joe went down to see his garden.
When you take over a garden, you often inherit a structure or feature that you have to embrace and incorporate into the design. But very few of us are confronted with something as large as this, a Grade 2 listed viaduct. When Roger Saul moved here nearly 20 years ago, he not only had to incorporate this disused railway into the garden layout, he also set himself the challenge of creating structure within the garden which would work throughout the year. So Roger, what did you think when you first saw this incredibly dominant viaduct?
I literally came round the corner and then it was boom. That's a big, big viaduct and it's a huge lake. And if you think of it, when you have a garden, what are the things you dream of? Well, could I have a river through it? But a viaduct?
And that is, I mean, it's such a dominant structure that in a way you can't soften it too much. It's there to stay.
Anything softening would have to be about 30 metres tall to have any effect.
Yeah, but actually, well, you don't want to soften it, do you? Because it draws the eye through the arches really nicely to the beautiful countryside beyond, but it's almost like a brick wall at the same time. It creates more of a sense of enclosure in this garden than I would have thought, but on a vast scale.
Yeah. No, you know, I think I've probably got one of the biggest sculptures in any garden in the world.
The current garden design is based around a very ornate rockery which dates back to the 1960s. The then owner was so enthused by a gold medal winning garden he saw at the Chelsea Flower Show that he commissioned a grander version to be planted at Kilver Court. It is absolutely classic, but to some it must feel very dated.
Wearing my fashion design hat, of course, obviously, every season's got to move on, and last season is rubbish, and, you know, you've got to keep moving on.
Yeah, because there's a lot of fashion in gardening too.
Exactly. To me, the rockery garden here, Chelsea gold medal winning, point in time in 1960, it is probably one of the most important gardens, I would think, left in the country that still has its shape and form.
Have you ever been tempted to really meddle with it at all? I mean, absolutely, you know, let's get rid of it, let's do something modern, something different here at all?
Only when a Sunday Times journalist once said to me, oh, this is boring, it's out of date. And I was trying to go, no, but it's a beautiful thing in its own right. Why would you change it?
You've convinced me completely. I can see that it is a design classic. The structure of the planting, for a start, you know, we've got the lovely upright junipers and the yews and the form of the plants and the contrast in the winter. It must really look fantastic too.
It does, because of course you've got all the shape of the rocks and the conifers. It's slightly starker, but it's still very exciting.
With the serrata stigma just cascading down over the front of that rock, that is absolutely beautiful planting. But you really play on scale, and you can play on scale here because you've got the huge viaduct in the background which sort of sets the tone of the scale.
So probably if you had this rock garden without the viaduct, it would seem massive, but the viaduct takes it back into context again, doesn't it? So, Joe, this is probably my little imprint on the garden.
This is the bit that you've actually got your hands on that you could change. This lovely formal parterre. I think it's absolutely beautiful, actually. So where did the inspiration for this parterre garden come from?
Well, as a fashion designer, I spent a lot of time in the 80s and the 90s over in Paris. That's where I first saw this amazing army museum gardens, which is called, I think, Muséum de l'Armée. And they had these amazing, huge shell shapes of box and yew hedging and topiary. And I just thought, I'd love to do that one day. And that just sprang back in mind when I first came here. I thought, what could I do to give this a formal entrance? So I tried to make it very simple, 2 roses only. And we've got...
They're beautiful, the roses, aren't they? Is that Gertrude Jekyll, the pink one?
Gertrude Jekyll, the pink one, exactly. And it's a very fragrant rose.
And it smells absolutely gorgeous. And the blue one?
Blue one's called Blue for You, and I had meant it to be slightly bluer or purpler, if you like, in a sense, but it's fine.
You know, you've got the viaduct, you've got the lake, got the rock garden, and now your stamp.
You've got different bits that really chart the history of this site. And along comes little Rog and says, what am I going to do to make my fashion imprint? So I just really thought this parterre, it's not, you know, it's not a huge, great thing, but it's a very important part of the whole. And I must say, I felt terribly relieved, having done it, that it worked.
When I first came into this garden this morning, I honestly didn't know how I felt about it. Did I like it or didn't I? It felt a bit dated to me. But having spent a day here and talking to Roger, I now completely get it. I realised that as a garden designer and many gardeners, we go in sometimes too early and rip elements out of a garden and we want to stamp our mark on it. So hold back, think about it, because you might be getting rid of a design classic.